Failures are a part and parcel of AI and transformation. I think the key here is to learn fast from your failures. And so that's been very critical to this journey, that you will fail. I think in the AI world, the way I see this, you will have to make many bets, and maybe a lot of those bets will fail, but the ones succeed have much larger payoffs. And you fail, but you have to pivot fast and learn fast. I feel leaders in the future, and even today, I have only 3 jobs, right? They set the vision, they remove roadblocks, and they stay out of the way. Actually, I think I'm not a big fan of fail fast. I think the key is to learn fast. If you fail fast and not learn anything, it doesn't help much. Your job is to set the vision and remove roadblocks. And lastly, you not literally, but metaphorically, you'll have to go to school many times in your life, right? So learning has to be continuous.
You're listening to Data Analytics Chat, where data meets career.
Welcome to Data Analytics Chat, the podcast where we discuss the world of data, AI, and the careers shaping it. My guest today is Dushyanth Sekhar, Head of AI and Data Platforms at S&P Global, where he's playing a leading role in transforming their data platform. In this episode, we'll unpack his career journey, the moments that shaped his career, and share the insights he's gained to anyone looking to grow their own career. And also the data topic for this week is how Gen AI and agents are reshaping the game. Dushyanth, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Ben. Happy to be here.
My pleasure. So do we start off with introduce yourself, give yourself a bit of background to the...
Sure. My name is Dushyanth Sekhar, work for S&P Global. At S&P Global, as a part of the enterprise data organization, I lead the data platforms and the AI, which basically means that from the time data is available in its raw form until it has some commercial value, the entire pipeline and all the tooling around it, my team takes care of that.
So then
that's interesting, right? I never came from a traditional technology background, so I started my career. Actually, my first job was I was replying to Amazon customers back in 2000. So I was working for a company which were doing customer service for Amazon in India. So that's where I started my career. So I don't come from a technology background. And over time, I joined S&P in 2009. Prior to that, I used to work with an insurance company, have some background in actuarial science. And 2009, I joined S&P as a part of their ratings group, was doing multiple roles across data and analytics. And around 2015, when the first generation of machine learning and robotic process automation was coming in, that's how I got interested in this space. I always had an interest in math and statistics, which was a good thing, which is helpful because a lot of what happens in this space under the hood is all math. And over time, that role transformed, and here I am.
And what drew you into the field? Was it just any particular interest, or did you fall into it?
That's very interesting. So actually what happened was around 2014-15, I was used to manage a large data team, and I was very interested with the new age technologies which were coming up. And fortunately for me, the person I was working for at that time, and I had expressed some interest to do some work in this space. And he was kind enough to create a role for me. So for about a year and a half, I was just by myself trying to figure these things out. So the interest was basically, I think it was a mix of, I was at a stage of a career where I want to do something different, and maybe some luck that these technologies were coming to the fore that time. So it was a natural marriage.
Okay. And then looking back, has there been a defining moment when you realised that this industry was the right choice for you?
I think when I first made the move, a lot of the people I spoke to was the technology was still very nascent at that point, and they felt I'm taking a very big chance and I should just stick to what I'm doing. But yeah, so there was a little bit of pressure on me that initially a couple of years I was like, okay, did I do the right choice? But I think the defining moment for me, if I look back and say, it's difficult to pick one, but the first supervised system we built This was the first one we ever got into production with. This was, I think, way back in 2017 or 18. I think once I started seeing the results from what we had built, I think some of those apprehensions were less, and I thought this is the future. So I think probably that first production run of we built a supervised information retrieval system. It was small, it was not a big platform, but I think the success there probably was the defining moment.
Okay. And then, obviously, you've obviously come from India to the US. How was that for yourself? Was that sort of a big challenge for yourself?
So I've worked in the UK in the past and I have been around, but yeah, I think that was the right time to the move to the US because the technology was on that gradient where it was moving up. And I think with all the innovation happening here at that point of time, I think it was the right move. And also from a mindset perspective, I think coming here helped me a lot, right? I was much closer to the customers. I was interacting with a lot of smaller companies which were in the space. So I think all of that kind of came together when I moved here in 2018. So I think moving here in hindsight has been beneficial. Of course, I miss home, but professionally, it has been very enriching for me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think obviously moving does add to your experience in life.
Absolutely.
So with yourself there, obviously you've had a great career, worked for some great companies. So has there been a period or like a failure or learning that's turned into an important lesson for you in disguise?
Absolutely. Failures are a part and parcel of AI and transformation. I think the key here is to learn fast from your failures. And so that's been very critical to this journey that you will fail. I think in the AI world, the way I see this is you will have to make many bets. And maybe a lot of those bets will fail, but the ones which succeed will have much larger payoffs. So unlike traditional software development cycles where success is fairly guaranteed in most cases when, say, you're just building an application. But in the AI world, it's not like that, right? The problems are not linear in that sense. So sometimes you'll start with a problem, take an approach, it doesn't work, and you fail, but you have to pivot fast and learn fast. So I think that's the kind of the cultural side which has to also shift in organizations where such experimentation and failure is encouraged and tolerated. And I think S&P has given us that freedom to go for the big prize. And as a part of that, you do fail at times. So you just have to take it in the stride.
And can you pinpoint a specific example which has really been critical to your learning?
So when I initially started on this journey, especially on the information retrieval side, so we were grabbing a lot of information from big financial documents, right? These are 300-400 pages long. So my initial thought was I could just build a system which will just do everything and everything will be fully automated. But like within 3 or 4 months, I realized that the best way to work with these systems is to cohabitate these with the human intelligence and not supplant it. So I think that was a big learning from me, that taking a more human plus machine approach rather than looking at as a choice between a human and a machine. So that was a big learning for me because initially you're always a little bit, these technologies are hyped. So you feel you can just code your way through it. But I think that reality dawned upon me pretty soon. And that was really helpful, right? Once we realized that the better architecture was to be able to invoke the human as needed, and then things became more clearer.
Yeah, so obviously AI is going to help us save time, but it's not going to completely wipe out the human nature with taking all our jobs.
Yeah. That's a very interesting point you make, right? Because do you see a job as a series of tasks, right? That's the key question. Like tasks will get automated, but your job is just not a series of tasks, right? Once some of those tasks get automated, it also frees up you to do other stuff. So I think that's the way to think about it, that giving that time back to the humans and AI helps doing that, and the humans can then use that time and do more creative stuff.
Yeah, no, I
Solution.
completely agree. I think obviously it's getting more, obviously, I guess giving heroes more strategic thinking to do the thinking, which is obviously what we should be doing.
Yeah.
Quality or skills have made the biggest difference for you stepping into leadership?
I feel leadership has, I think at a more strategic level, you have to set the vision. So that's important. Execution is important, that the vision has to be executed. And what underpins these two is the culture, right? So at a strategic level, those are the way I look at it. But on a more day-to-day level, I feel leaders in the future, or even today, have only three jobs, right? They set the vision, they remove roadblocks, and they stay out of the way. That's the last part is always slightly difficult because I I had to maybe relinquish some of the stuff which I said I can't micromanage everything. So that's been a journey. I'm not yet perfected it, but try to get better at it. But yeah, I think those are the big lessons, and also create a culture where people are willing to take risks, right? So I think that's very important in today's day and age, that, if people are not on risk averse, then innovation is not going to happen. And a culture where people will be willing to take risks when they feel, okay, there no punitive action if they fail. So I think that's very important in today's day and age, and which means also empowering your team to make those decisions, right? So I think those are the few things which probably shaped my leadership.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you should, I mean, you as a leader, you should be pushing your teams, push the boundaries, and not necessarily promote failure, but obviously that's just promoting the learning, isn't it? Because if you're going to keep,
Empathy.
you need to push the boundaries basically, because things do change. You need to evolve as everything else evolves around you.
Absolutely. I think I'm not a big fan of fail fast. I think the key is to learn fast. If you fail fast and not learn anything, it doesn't help much.
Yeah, you don't Groundhog Days. What's it you, or has it been a person that's been the biggest influence on your career, or has it been technology? And why?
I think, of course, professionally, there have been many people I worked with. Some of the leaders I worked with have had a lot of influence on me. But I think it's an interesting story, right? I used to play a lot of chess. I still play. And I think it was 90. I never thought about it at that time. But one of the things which really got me interested into machine learning per se was I was a big fan of Gary Kasparov. And I think Deep Blue was the IBM engine that beat him in 94, I think, or 95. I don't exactly remember. And I was really upset because till then, today it's pretty much par for the course that engines beat humans very easily in chess. But at that time, it was like a watershed moment. I just couldn't believe how a machine could beat a grandmaster. And then I got into kind of learning. That got me interested into this whole machine learning stuff, right? Of course, that was a very old technology, which I think IBM never. I think that Deep Blue got killed after that match. But I think that probably, or that always was on my mind, right? How this was even possible, right? And now when I look back, it makes more sense. But I think that was probably something which it still is back of my mind, that it's unbelievable 30 years back this happened. And I think that did have some influence on me choosing this path. Maybe I didn't realize that time, but now if I think back, I think that did play a part in at least getting me interested in this space.
And obviously, yeah, it'd been obviously at the time, it'd been like crazy to think.
Yeah, I know, it's very crazy, right? Yeah.
Like now, yeah, it's the way around. It's crazy to
Doesn't
you
have-
could beat a robot
Yeah,
computer.
yeah. Yeah.
So obviously, you progressed into leadership then, and say if you were mentoring someone who wants to step in to become a leader, there's many that want to move from the technical expert into like leadership. What advice would you give?
I think if somebody wants to take more leadership roles in the AI world, right, or kind of work on AI platforms, I think one thing which is important is the fundamentals of the business don't change, right? You still have to look at what customer problems you're solving. So AI is not working in a vacuum, right? So one example, I think I was speaking to one professor who was pioneered some of the research in the 70s and 80s around AI, which was more conceptual. And he was telling me this, that let's assume that you have a business which sells hot dogs, right? And one day you get an AI chef or a robot which makes the hot dogs. Customers would come, they would be excited probably to see a robotic hot dog in the, but eventually they'll only buy your hot dog if it tastes good, it's hygienic. And so those things don't change in the AI world, right? What the customers expect of the product. So customers are not going to accept a hot dog which doesn't taste well just because it is made by AI, right? So that first principle has to be etched in your mind as a leader, that you still have to satiate that customer need. Now, you could do it better with AI, but customer is not just going to pay for a product just because you use AI. So that's important. Secondly, I think you have to keep an open mind. AI only works if you can, the full value of AI only comes if you are reimagining the workflows. As a leader, you will have to have some system design skills and understand the overall system rather than just looking at the technology side of this, right? So that's second. And thirdly, as I mentioned, more on the softer side, I think you will have to relinquish more decision making to the people who are closer to the problem. Your job is to set the vision and remove roadblocks. And lastly, you not literally, but metaphorically, you'll have to go to school many times in your life, right? So learning has to be continuous, which probably in the non-AI world was not very pivotal once you reach certain leadership positions. But today it's not like that, right? The space is evolving so fast that you have to keep yourself abreast. So I think those are a few things which I probably would be my inputs to anybody foraying into this space.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's constant learning. And how do you go about as a leader? How do you stay afloat with the changes? Because it is moving rather quick.
It's getting hard, right? I'll be very honest with you. The amount of information out there now to consume it, there's also a lot of noise, right? So you've got to make a choice of what you want to read and spend your time. I do more micro reading now. That's something I learned from someone I was talking to, that I don't read the entire stuff. Of course, some of the LLM tools help summarization and things like that. And then the topics which I find which are more relevant or interesting to the work I do, I dwell deeper into. So that's important. The other thing is important is also to reduce bias, right? Because you want to know both sides, both views, right? And not get subsumed by the hype. So that's been helpful. But to be very honest, that can I keep up with everything which is going on? No. So that's where the teams come in and they fill in the vacuum. But yeah, so I try to spend at least a few hours every day just after work, just looking at the news or reading some of the research papers. But yes, the information is much more than time. So that's always a challenge.
Yeah, no, and I think obviously there's so much to take. Our brains you can't take in, you can't remember everything. It's like that's not changed. So you need to. I think it's where you specify your team to. Everyone's got to be their expert in their own right. So you can't know it all. I think this is when our leaders, you need to have faith in your junior members in your team that have got the more specialist knowledge to get the right answer, because you just can't do too much going on.
Exactly, right. Maybe say 2 or 3 years back, I would more in the weeds with all the projects and initiatives which are going on. Now it is just not possible, right? I think if I try to do that, I just become a roadblock. So sometimes you're absolutely right. Sometimes you just have to stand back and trust the people you hire to do the right thing.
Cool. And then if I was what excites you about the future, I guess the next chapter of your career?
I'm an optimist, so I'm very optimistic of what the language model, the agents bring to the table. Of course, these are uncharted territories and there are always counter views. But I feel we are in a similar situation like we were in, say, late 90s with the internet, right? I was watching one clip of Bill Gates. I think it was on a David Letterman show. It was 95 or 96. When Bill Gates was like, what is this internet? And he just said, oh, it's a page where you can go ahead and see some information. So I think we are probably in the AI world at a similar space, but I think the future is, I think the opportunities and what we can do with it, not just in the work I'm doing, but how we can do good in the world overall. I think the opportunities are limitless. So I'm pretty optimistic, and I think that's exciting. The other thing which excites me is there are like just the excitement in the teams, right? Every day we have this kind of a teams channel when every day people are like, putting this stuff they're experimenting on or sharing ideas, and that then the whole buzz around that is very invigorating. So I don't feel stressed even if you have a long day. You're doing so much exciting stuff that it feels gratifying. So those are a few things which I'm excited about. How this will play out, I think we can all have our crystal ball. But I think in the long term, I think humans have a tendency to overestimate risk and underestimate opportunity. But I think in 3 or 4 years back, when we look back at this conversation, I think the world will be very different.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's also exciting times. And I think, it's just interesting, right? Things are evolving so quickly, and I think it's interesting. It's good, great to see, and it's just got to take it step by step, haven't you? Really?
Exactly. Yeah, just let it play out. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So obviously, LLMs, Gen AI has taken all the hype over the last couple of years, and probably will do for the next foreseeable future. So obviously, you've been involved in this space. So from the hype to like utility, how is S&P moving beyond like just the buzzwords with these and Gen AI?
So actually, one of the things S&P has been on this journey even before these buzzwords came into play, right? We had a language model in production somewhere around 2018 or 2019. Of course, that time the word LLM and the transformer architecture had not come in, and we were just calling it a model, right? It was more library-based training, but it was a small language model for one of our data sets which we had trained. So I think we have seen the journey from very rule-based systems like RPA to supervised systems. So we were already on that curve. So a lot of this is not come as a big surprise. Unlike other industries where data is more a byproduct, in our case, data and analytics and workflows are the product, right? So we were been dealing with big data even before the term big data was coined. So the ecosystem was already there, right? So it was easy to see where the opportunities are and cut through some of the hype. There's always hype. I think these cycles have to play out. So that's something at S&P we've been very focused on also upskilling our workforce on these technologies, even 7 or 8 years back, right? So we have these essential tech programs where we bring these technologies to the masses, to all employees. So we have been on that journey. So that's the kind of the people and the strategy side. On the actual work side, I think these technologies are blend very well with the work we do. We are in the data world. We have a lot of data to provide these models, and that's definitely a competitive advantage. And I think the other ingredient is that, which is becoming more and more important now, is the subject matter expertise around those workflows and ecosystems, right? So we have one like world leading experts on data, analytics, ratings, index. So when you bring all these things together and then also unleash the power of the LLMs, the value proposition to our customers and investors is very strong. So I think that's how I see it. Of course, we can get into specific areas on where we are implementing these technologies, but at a high level, I think S&P is front and center of this revolution.
Been doing the project obviously for a while now, so it's an understanding. It's like not just hype, is it? It's just you need to just.
No.
There's a lot of work that has to go into it, isn't it? You said you started like 2018 and still working on it. Obviously, it's a constant evolution. And especially when you've got companies out there just wanting to just put LLMs in straight away without doing the background, there's a lot of work goes into it, isn't it?
Absolutely. As you said, it's an evolution, right? Probably I should not have said revolution, more of an evolution. You're right that in the AI, you could also always parachute in an agent or an LLM and you'll get some value, right? It's not that. But if you truly have to make this as a competitive differentiator, it has to be embedded in the fabric of what you do, right? It can't be this standalone thing which you just have an API and everybody just calling it, right? So I think that system design is being core to how we look at these things. So I'll give you a couple of examples, right? Like when you look at very labor intensive processes, those processes are fundamentally based on the principle of division of labor, right? And it's understandable. So 20 years back, if you had take a very complex task, you would break it down into chunks, right? And say, okay, let Dushyanth do this and Ben do this and somebody else do this. Now, when you try to morph that process in an AI world and you don't fundamentally design the process for a machine, you're not going to get the benefits, right? So you might have to do some system to redesign or lean the process out before you kind of parachute in the technology. So I think we had a very strong culture of lean even before these technologies came up. So I think now with that and the technology, we're able to blend it, especially in this workflow. We had in a human workflow, this complex workflow I was talking about, it had 20 components, right? But when we moved it to an AI world, even before we did anything with the technology, we re-engineered that process to only have 3 workflows. And then the AI came in and gave us a lot of benefits. But if you had left the process as is, we would have still been successful, but the return would have been lower, would not have been as much as when we re-engineered the workflow.
Yeah, and I'll also speak to a lot of leaders, and they say obviously the LLMs is the easy bit, but it's not. It's still hard, but it's like the hard bit is actually all the stuff behind the scenes that has to be done.
Exactly. Yeah, all the stuff which is not cool. So that's where the value is.
It's always the way, isn't it? Even like in sport, like you have to do all the training behind to get to the level of excellence.
Exactly. I think that's a great point, right? If you're watching the Premiership, you only watch the 90 minutes or what, but all the stuff which goes behind that before the match, I think, nobody sees that, right?
Yeah, and there's a thing like Usain Bolt used to say, I trained 4 years to run 9 seconds. Like, it's very similar to that.
You bring that up, I think the first bot we put into production in 2016, something we called it Usain Bot, actually. A little bit of
So obviously S&P Global, obviously a massive company, obviously massive data at scale. How are LLMs changing the game across the platforms?
There are a variety of initiatives, but I'll give you a broader view on this, right? So as a part of the EDO, I think one of the kind of implicit assumptions bringing the EDO together was to leverage the power of data, technology, and subject matter expertise, which we have within the divisions, right? Bringing that to the center has been very powerful. So that's where, I start. Now, on a strategic side, we're focusing on 3 areas, right? One is growth. So when I talk about growth, you can look at LLMs on how it can enhance existing products. So we have things like if you are a subscriber to our Capital IQ Pro platform, we have now a chat-based interface where you can do some very complex queries just through natural language, right? These were workflows where probably users had to click many times. Now they can just interface with our huge database through a chat interface and get a lot of information now. So that's an example of kind of enhancing an existing product. Then we also have our ability to bring new products to the market has significantly with LLMs, right? For example, the general life cycle of going to market with a new data product has come down. Our ability to mine information at scale has significantly gone up. Like one of the areas we do private market is a big area of investment for us. And one of the initiatives we worked on was how do you do probability of defaults for private companies when there are no financials, right? So you basically go with semantic footprint of these companies on the web and triangulate that data with other publicly available sources and then come up with some quantitative model to do a PD. But in a non-LLM world, these products would have just not been possible. We're talking about 30, 40, 50 million private companies. For humans to manually mine and triangulate that data would have just been impossible. So on the growth side, we are enhancing new products and we are also building new products which are powered by these technology. The second area is when what we call speed and optimize, right? We have to optimize the backroom engine which powers all these products. So where I get into information retrieval, linking, we have a lot of classification type of problems. But our approach is to build platforms which scale across these use cases. So that's on speed and optimize, right? So one is grow the business, optimize what's already there. And the last part is the interesting part, right? What we call future proofing, right? How we future proof our products and people both. So those are the three areas which are basically targeting. And then there are some interesting work happening across all three.
No, I love it. And it's good that you actually focus on like business terms, if you get what I mean, like growth or efficiencies. Because a lot of businesses are just implementing, they want an LLM just to be part of the crowd. And this is feedback from a lot of businesses. So it's, I think you still need to remain to your core. Like whatever situation you are in as a business, whatever plan you have, you still need to focus on business, don't you?
Absolutely, right. As I said, that if you're a hot dog seller, eventually you have to make good hot dogs, right? So that's the key and that's how you give value to your customers, investors, and stakeholders, right? So that fundamental principle doesn't change. So when you apply AI, keeping those outcomes in mind, the success is much better. But you're right, if you just do it for the sake of doing it and with the new shiny toy. Actually, in technology, I don't remember the exact name, it's some kind of an anti-pattern, right? When you're just using some technology which just because it's available, it's actually an anti-pattern.
So what does a like reimagined work look like in the age of AI? You know?
I don't know. I may not have a definitive answer, but what I could say is that I think it will transform a lot of things we do as humans, and people who use AI will definitely replace people who don't. So that's the fundamental principle, right? Irrespective of what you do, these technologies will touch your work or world, right? You cannot going to be insulated from it. All right. You could always argue that there are some stuff which AI cannot do, but I think keeping those anomalies aside, I think anybody in any sort of profession today is already being touched by AI, right? Like basic things like Copilot, right? Everybody is a user of certain technologies will have a Copilot. So those things, it's not a thing which few data scientists are doing in some back room. So everybody is touched by it. So that's something which is going to come, right? And now how it will transform the businesses, I think the jury is out. What new businesses will be created, we don't know. But we definitely know that's going to be the state of play, right? That I don't see a business in the future which doesn't embed AI in some shape or form into their workflows. Right? And the customers are demanding that as well. So it's from both sides.
How would be the best way to embed it? Because obviously you've got this new fantastic technology. Businesses have got their old ways of working, and then they've got this new technology that they need to implement. How's best to embed it? Because there's a lot of knowledge transfer and learning involved, isn't there?
Yes. So I think that's an interesting point, right? Like effectively you're changing tires on a running truck, right? So you can't just stop the truck and say, okay, I'm going to pause my business for a couple of years and then reincarnate it in the AI world. I think that's not going to happen. So you have to keep running what you're running and at the same time bring these technologies, which is easier said than done because the reality of the world is there are still a lot of legacy applications which you have to run, especially in large organizations. So I think the fundamental principle is to be redesign the systems itself and the workflows, right? So that's where it has to start. And that has to be driven by what your customer is needing, right? So once you blend those things together, then you see where AI will help you, right? But if you just start with the AI first, then it's going to be a problem, right? And you might have a lot of solutions which you deploy, but will you deliver the full value to your customer investor? That's not going to happen if you just do point solutions. So think platforms, think system redesign, and always be ready that something will change, right? So especially with LLMs, you see every 3 months, there's the progress they make is pretty significant. So you have to keep your options open so that if tomorrow you have to pivot or change some components in your ecosystem, that process is fast. Because obsolescence is much faster now, unlike 10 years back. So you will have to be prepared to be able to pivot very quickly when the technology makes very seismic shifts. Because those shifts are not linear anymore, right? What an LLM could do in a year's time, it's very difficult to predict at this point of time.
Yeah, and I think it's key for people now to be adaptable because even in the past, people used to be set in their ways. They only want to work this way, but now you constantly got to keep learning and evolving.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's a cultural part of that as well. That how do you have a large workforce and how do you create a ecosystem where that learning is continuous and it's not seen as a standalone thing, right?
Okay, cool. And obviously, there's a lot of talk around agents, obviously the future of automation. What's your thinking around this?
I mean, the agents are the next kind of frontier of the LLM, right? When the LLMs cannot take actions on their own, right? So in the real world, what humans do is take actions, right? They take some information and they have to act on it. So I think the agents come in that last mile space, right? To say, okay, so think of this like an agent could be interacting with some tools, some resources, which is some data, and then some prompts and things like that. And then also can be able to take some action. So the agents are going to be very critical to this equation. But again, the principles apply, right? That do you just want to parachute an agent when it does something on the side? Or do you see agent as a part of your larger ecosystem, which is like in working with all these tools, resources, and prompts? So I think the latter is the way to go. Of course, there's a lot of stuff happening. We have about 25 agents in production right now. And the last part of the equation is also how do you pivot your workforce? On the technical side, right, developers were always, their output was code, right? So today that equation also changes a bit, right? That I feel today the output for developers are more structured communication. They are solving problems, right? The code is like a small part of that equation. So I think these are the areas where, if you look at traditional development life cycle, then you expect these people to pivot and build agents. You also have to start thinking differently about how their work is, right? They have to be more interactive with the customers. And every time you put something into production, the measure of success is not just how the code runs, but when the code runs, is it solving a customer problem, which becomes the next frontier to capture.
Do you feel it's more important to build these from scratch than like out of the box? Because there's also the benefits of out of the box, but I think It's so much more important, isn't it, to build from scratch, in my view.
In some of the things, yes, you just have to completely rewire. But in some things, you might still get some benefit having some point solutions. But you're right. The general approach will be to build platforms and not just individual agents which are running all over the place.
Cool.
The agent has to be a part of an ecosystem, right? It's not some standalone thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. So what lessons have you learned from integrating Gen AI into your environment?
One lesson is the last mile integration is much more complex than it appears to be, because you cannot rewrite all your legacy stuff which is in the peripheries, right? Sometimes you'll have to take some tactical call and kind of evolve. But that's a big lesson. And the other thing is eventually model, however they good are, they are stochastic in nature, right? The outputs are probabilistic, right? So you will have to be able to invoke humans in some workflows. That probabilistic output has to be more deterministic. So that human has to come into the picture. Now, how much, where and when could be very workflow specific, but it's a gradient, right? It's not a binary kind of condition that, okay, you take a workflow and totally move it to an agent or you don't. So on that gradient, there could be some workflow which would require very little human touch, but then there could be some workflows where that human touch might be more. So you have to look at it as a gradient rather than a binomial thing.
You've been fantastic. You've shared some great insights. I'm glad you've done some great things around the sort of generative AI space, and I really appreciate your time on today's podcast.
Thank you, Ben. It was great chatting with you and some great questions. Appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
You've been listening to Data Analytics Chat Podcast. Subscribe to our channel for more stories and insights in data and career.